Time to pull up a chair. We've got another great story for you today in the rLounge. Where do we draw the line, and just how tough can tough love go? Today in the rLounge, the lesson learned is a painful one. Brother robbed me because I didn't give him $2,000. My parents defended him, so I got him sent to jail. I, 35 male, have always had a strained relationship with my brother, Steve, 37 male. Even when we were kids, he was a wild troublemaker, while I was the boring type that was always in his books. So we never got along well. He never cleaned up his act, though. He actually got worse as the years went on. He's been arrested for all sorts of things, like causing fights, public intoxication, and even possessing drugs at one point. It's been stressful for the whole family always to have to bail him out from jail or pick him up at the station. Somehow, he always acts like his lifestyle makes him a tough guy. I'm as straight-laced as they come, and he usually teases me for being so boring. He often says life isn't worth living if you don't get into a bit of trouble once in a while. That's always sounded stupid to me because we're adults with responsibilities. I don't need to fight another dude in front of a bar to have fun. I have books and nights out with friends for that. He would just call me a square for thinking like that. I'll be the first to admit, I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm a systems engineer who works on satellites, specifically how they communicate. Exciting stuff, I know. The firm I work with often handles government contracts, which means I need a security clearance. My security clearance is reinvestigated every few years, so you can bet your last dollar that I focus hard on keeping my nose clean. Like, really clean. I don't think I've ever gotten a parking ticket. My job keeps me pretty comfortable, and it's very fulfilling for me, so I can't afford to lose it. Getting caught up in his stupid crap could actually result in me losing my job. You'd probably understand why I don't spend much time with him. He doesn't dislike me. He just finds me boring. I don't really dislike him either, but I don't like spending time around him because of how easily he finds trouble. I decided to stop hanging out with him the day he nearly got us into a fight outside of a bar over something stupid. A guy bumped into him and Steve started mouthing off. It escalated fast and I had to pull him away before it became a full-on brawl. He seemed annoyed that I didn't let him finish it. Now, my parents. They've both been a bit too forgiving in Steve's antics. When he was a teenager, they always had an attitude of, he'll grow out of it. Now he's an adult and they insist that he just needs a chance to get his life together. As far as I'm concerned, they failed him. They enabled his problematic behavior by making excuses for him. And now he can't hold down a job without getting fired for picking fights or skimming cash from the register. It would almost be pitiable if it wasn't pathetic. Do you know how utterly humiliating it is to get a call from your older brother's teenage manager telling you that he's been arrested again? When my parents realized I wasn't going to get involved in his issues anymore, they turned on me. I didn't become an outcast or anything, but they weren't happy with my choice and took every opportunity that they could to remind me. They both accused me of abandoning my brother. More than once, my mom said I was uppity because I had a nice house and a good job. I tried to explain that I wasn't just going to enable him if he wasn't going to try to clean up his act. One of these days, he'd do something really stupid. He'd commit the wrong crime or piss off the wrong person and ruin his life for good. They didn't appreciate me calling him a common criminal, and we stopped talking often after that. It didn't feel good to lose contact with my parents like that, but I wasn't going to impose myself on people who insulted me for enforcing my boundaries. Recently, Steve had been asking for some money. That's not unusual. He's always asking for $20 or $50 anytime he comes across me. I tried not to make it a habit, but once in a while, I'd help him out. Then one day he came to visit me at home. As usual, he asked for money, but this time he wanted $2,000. That's a lot, so naturally I asked why he needed it. He was very cagey and refused to give me a straight answer. I'd hoped he'd be able to give me a reasonable answer. I guess I'd been hoping he'd say he needed to sign up for a course, or even to get a car so he could start Ubering. Anything that would show he was trying to clean his act up. Hell, I'd have given him $5,000 if that was the case. I really do want to see Steve doing well for himself, but the lack of a straight answer led me to conclude that he had a less than savory use for the money. If he was trying to push drugs or something, then I wanted no part of it. I told him outright that I wouldn't give him anything if he couldn't come out with it and tell me what he needed it for. I let him know I couldn't afford to be part of anything shady. He got mad at me for that and said that watching my butt was more important to me than helping the family. I pointed out that I had a lot to lose if I got wrapped up in something sketchy, but that's not all. I added that I cared about him and didn't want him to use the money to put himself in danger. I wasn't going to give him money to start slinging drugs, gambling, or whatever other illegal scheme he'd cooked up. He didn't like that. He started yelling at me, accusing me of acting like I was better than him because I had a good job. He said I was lucky I was born smart, and that I never had to struggle. Always the same argument when I tried to get him to turn his life around. We had all the same opportunities, but I'd taken advantage of them. I wasn't born smart. I worked like crazy in high school and college to learn what I needed to know. I still spend hours weekly studying to keep up with my programming languages and improve my career skills. Nothing was handed to me, and I told him that. I think I started yelling around that point too. I told him that it was always someone else's fault with him. He's always blaming our parents, me, his boss, his friends. I said he'd never turn his life around if he didn't start taking accountability. He looked so mad that I thought he was going to hit me. Instead, he just stormed out and slammed the door behind me. I knew he was mad, but I figured that would be the end of it. He'd steam for a few days, and eventually he would come back when he needed something again. But it was different this time. A few days after the incident, I went out for a late bike ride. I wanted to get some stuff from a local store, and I felt like the exercise would do me some good. I was only out for about 40 minutes, but when I got back, something felt off. I'd been in the house for a minute before I realized what it was. My living room lights had been on when I came in. I was certain I had turned them off before I left. I suddenly felt a wave of fear. Had someone broken in? Nothing seemed to be missing, and it didn't look like anyone had gone through anything. I had a TV and a PS5 right in the living room, and they were still there. I started thinking my imagination was getting to me until I checked my bedroom. It wasn't obvious, but someone had clearly gone through my desk and my drawers. A few of the drawers weren't closed flush, and I'm very particular about that. When I looked inside them, the contents were in disarray, like someone had rummaged through them. Now I was really scared. Someone had actually been in my home. I regretted not having installed security cameras in my home like I'd been planning. I brought out my phone and prepared to call the police when I was hit with an odd idea. It felt like a long shot, but my Tesla had been sitting in the driveway. There was a good chance that the intruder had walked past my car to get into the house, and that meant they might have been picked up by my car's Sentry mode. I ran down to my car to get the flash drive and went up to my computer. There was one video from tonight. Turns out I had gotten lucky. The thief had tried my car's door on his way in. Maybe he was looking for cash or valuables in there. No luck for him. But that dumb move had captured the thief before he pulled on his mask to jimmy a window. I wasn't entirely surprised to find out it was my brother. I realized how sad that was. I considered my options. The logical choice was to call the police, but I also felt conflicted. I mean, he's my brother. Even if he's an idiot who only makes wrong choices, I was also angry though. Angry that he'd violate my privacy and security like this. Part of me wanted to hand him over to the cops along with the video evidence and make him pay for his mistakes for once. I cooled off and decided to check out the extent of the theft and damages first. So I walked around the house and did a quick inventory. After a thorough search, I found out that only cash and some smaller valuables had been taken. What really stood out among the things he'd taken were one of my mechanical keyboards and 2 watches. This was too much to ignore. I didn't have up to $100 in cash lying around, but the watches were expensive. The keyboard was the worst part. I make custom mechanical keyboards as a semi-hobby, and they mean a lot to me. It cost quite a bit, too. This particular keyboard came out to around $500, and it was one of my favorites. I decided to give Steve a chance and call him first. I was hoping I'd be able to talk some sense into him and to get him to return my stuff. But he didn't make things that easy. Admittedly, I came in a bit hot, but I was mad. He just broken into my home. "Did you break into my house, you piece of crap?" He didn't miss a beat. He just asked me what I was talking about. I snapped and said he shouldn't lie to me, since he was on camera trying to break into my car too. He was silent for a few seconds, trying to decide whether to lie in case I was bluffing or tell the truth. He must have figured that there was no way out of it because he stopped at denying it. His brilliant reason for breaking into my home? He needed $2,000, and I didn't want to give it to him willingly. I told him that was a level of stupid that I hadn't expected from even him. He went off on me, accusing me of not caring about my family. According to him, it was my fault, and I had driven him to that. I couldn't believe that he was really saying that I was in the wrong for not giving him $2,000, as if that justified him breaking in and stealing my things. We went around in circles for a while, and when I finally got tired of it, I told him I would call the police if he didn't return my things immediately. He just laughed and said I wouldn't call the police because he'd taken a few things. I told him he had until tomorrow morning to bring my stuff back, but he just scoffed and hung up. That happened a few hours ago, and I'm stuck here trying to figure out what to do. I'm furious as hell, but I'm conflicted. On the one hand, he broke into my house. He stole from me and blamed me for it. I don't even feel safe right now as I'm typing this. On the other hand, he's my brother. Calling the police would have serious legal consequences for him, but it's not like I hadn't tried to help him out. My parents would hate me for it too. Guess I'll be forced to choose in the morning. I'll keep you guys updated on how this unfolds. Your brother's decision to break into your home crosses a serious line, and it's completely reasonable to want to protect your space and your belongings. You're not responsible for his actions. What he did was wrong, and he has to face the consequences. If you don't do something now, he'll just continue to cross the line. Update. Well, I did what I had to do. It hurts though, but I stand by my actions, and God knows I did everything I could to resolve this peacefully first. The very night of the break-in, right after my original post, I called my parents. I figured they might be able to talk some sense into Steve. They'd hate to see him go to jail after all. Turns out, I overestimated them because they immediately took his side. My dad said we needed to look out for each other, and I should have given him the money when he asked for it. He pretty much agreed with Steve and said that it was my fault that he broke into my place.
He was in a hard place. It must have been his only option.
My mom didn't have much better to say. She said he'd only taken small items, and I should be able to let it go of them easily. I pointed out that everything he'd taken was expensive, and that a lot of stuff was important to me. Then she suggested that I could give him the $2,000, and he could give me my items back. I asked her if she was really suggesting that I pay a ransom for my own stuff. She didn't really give a sensible answer to that. The conversation with my parents left me puzzled. They were no help. They were both on his side, deciding that I was the one in the wrong for refusing to hand him $2,000 and getting mad when he burgled me. I got tired of them enabling his negative behavior and resolved to handle matters myself. I let them know that I would be calling the police in the morning if they couldn't convince him to bring my stuff back. They both flipped out completely. My dad said I was heartless, and I'd be ruining Steve's life over a couple of things. I told him that Steve had already ruined his life with his choices, and I wasn't going to let him drag me with him. I hung up after that because I couldn't take any more of their guilt tripping. The next morning, my stuff still hadn't been returned. I gave Steve one last chance. I called him and let him know I was serious about calling the police. He just laughed and said, "You won't call the police." I realized that the reason he didn't even care if I'd caught him was because he couldn't actually imagine me calling the cops. He thought I'd always bend to his nonsense, like when we were kids, and I'd cover for him with our parents, or later on when I'd pick him up from the station or whatever bar he was stumbling out of. That was when I resolved to call the cops. Steve was a grown man, and if I let him get away with this, then I would be picking up after him for the rest of my life. So I did it. I called the police and told them everything. They came by and I showed them the damage to my window and the footage from my Tesla. The officers took my statement and confirmed that it was more than enough to press charges against my brother. They told me they would move forward with an investigation and an arrest. I felt sort of guilty while I was talking to them, but there was also a sense of satisfaction. Steve was going to face consequences for what he had done, and that was a win to me. I'd given him a chance, and he refused it, so he deserved whatever he got. Early in the evening, my parents called me, and let me tell you, they were furious. Steve had been arrested and called them. My dad was shouting his head off over the phone, saying I was tearing the family apart and ruining Steve's life. My mom, on the other hand, was crying in the background. I just told them that I wasn't the one ruining Steve's life. He had done that himself, and they'd held his hand while he did it. I didn't give them a chance to keep yelling at me. I just hung up. There was nothing more to say at that point. My dad was right. Steve was a repeat offender, and the courts didn't go easy on him at all. I submitted the video as evidence and testified at his trial. He was charged with breaking and entering and theft. Based on the value of what he had stolen, he'd committed a felony. He was facing a steep penalty for that. He would have gotten a public defender, but my parents broke the bank to get the best defense lawyer they could for him. I told them there was no point wasting their money on him, but they weren't ready to listen to me. Throughout his trial, my parents demonized me, saying I was throwing my brother's life away. Eventually, I got tired of listening to their insults and told them that they had thrown his life away by neglecting to raise him properly. My mom cried at the insinuation that she was responsible for her son going to prison, but I couldn't feel bad for her. It was true after all. They could have talked to him, tried to reason with him, and convinced him that he had gone too far this time, but they stood on his side instead. Too bad for them that their side was on the wrong side of the law. I never visited Steve in jail. There was no point. From what my parents had said, he blamed me completely. I hoped he'd learn a lesson about accountability while he was serving time, but for now, him being incarcerated made it easier for me to go no contact with him. Now my parents don't talk to me anymore, and I can't say I'm too bothered. It's a shame things had to go this way, but I don't regret my actions at all. I can't let my brother's poor decisions and reckless lifestyle drag me down. He's also old enough to deal with the consequences of the actions, and I won't beat myself up for it. It's clear that you tried everything possible to resolve this peacefully, and it's incredibly frustrating to see your parents enabling Steve's behavior instead of supporting you. You did what you had to do to protect yourself and your boundaries, OP. It's not just about the stolen items, it's about breaking the cycle of enabling behavior that could keep dragging you both down. By taking this step, you're showing that you won't be a safety net for his poor choices anymore, and that's a crucial lesson for him. What do you think? Did OP do the right thing? Thank you for joining us today in the rLounge. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. Until next time, and please put your chair back where you found it.